Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to our podcast here. We're going to be talking about Autoflowers here on CannaBuzz. So I'm really stoked to have you all here. We're broadcasting live right now to CannaBuzz, to our CannaBuzz Premium and Associate Producers. So those are our new supporter memberships. Check that out if you haven't already. Open up the app, open up the menu, and click membership options in the little slide out menu, and you can become a supporting member. And that helps us create more content like we are doing now. And you can even unlock access to cool t-shirts and all sorts of things that we'll be releasing to our associate producers. So thanks to our members to supporting us. We really appreciate that. But also a big shout out to our guest today, Full Duplex. He's joined us to talk about Autoflowers. We reached out to our community knowing that, well, actually, we reached out to our community initially and asked them what they wanted to learn about. And so they said Autoflowers, and this guy's name came up in particular, and we were told to talk to him. So I did just that. I reached out. I said thanks so much to our members, and I reached out, and thankfully Full Duplex was up for it. And so I would love to just kind of get this thing started. I would love for you to introduce yourself and give us a little bit of your background in Autoflowers.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate it. I really enjoy getting opportunities to talk about it. So we'll get into it. Like, I've been working with autos. Well, first I'll start off. It's Full Duplex. Some people know me as Dan. I get a mix of both these days, thanks to Shango. He got my real name out there, which is completely fine. I had never really, brought that to the public eye, but it was the right time to do so. I've been working with Autoflowers since 2010. I think it's, starting to become a blur these days because I've been working with them for so long. I got my first pack because I was curious about them, got them off of the Attitude Seed Bank. It's like, well, they seem to be low key, low smell, and that's what I needed at the time. And that's how I got involved with them. I picked up the Purple Gem. It was by Joint Doctor back then. Come to find out that it was actually produced by a breeder by the name of Mossy. She was from Spain, still is in Spain. And one thing led to another, and I ended up getting to meet her online, and we formed AFN with a few other people. And
that's the Autoflower Network, right?
That is correct. I'm so used to just abbreviating that.
Yeah,
that is the Autoflower Network, or autoflower.net. That's how you can find the forum. And I mean, there is well over a decade of information on there at this point. It's pretty cool to see that, to see that the site is still around. And big shout out to Son of Hobbs and Jordan, who still helps maintain that. And a few other guys out there as well.
So we have a lot of members in our community of all sorts of different backgrounds. We have people that have been growing for years and are super seasoned, and we have some questions that are, more on the, more experienced end. But we also have a lot of beginners. So I'd love to start with a super basic question, which is, what's an autoflower? What is an autoflower cannabis plant?
So autoflower is pretty much the name that has been given by the community of the people that work with it. It's a cultivar that is completely day neutral. And what I mean by that is it will flower under 24 hours of light. If you think about a pepper plant, it doesn't really need a flower cycle. It grows, it matures, it produces its fruit. Autoflowers behave the same way. And the autoflower is derived from hybridization of ruderalis. Ruderalis, is its initial background. That's where the day neutral comes from. And those cultivars were found up in harsh climates like Siberia and stuff like that, where they had to survive. And I think that's part of the mechanism that has become the evolution of it. It had to survive, figured it out that, we don't have the best light schedules. So let's just flower out based on maturity. And, cannabis loves to reproduce. It's really, really good at reproducing. It likes to flower. It likes to make seed. So that's just, in a nutshell, what an autoflower is.
Awesome. So what led you to starting an autoflower breeding company? That's kind of an interesting jump. You go from growing weed to discovering autoflowers or however that happened to starting a whole company. Those are a lot of steps.
And it was a long time to get those steps, and that's a good question. I don't get asked that one often, because a lot of the people who know me on the online community have seen me grow these through the years and have kind of seen that evolution. But in short, I started working with them early on, like we were talking about, and I noticed the potential that was there. I knew it was something that hadn't been worked with much. It needed a little help. And, it's the way we get some of the most common and sought after photo periods is because of the human hand helped it along. There weren't a lot of people working with them at the time. There was a huge base of it in Spain. The U.S. and the stateside, it just really wasn't messed with much more beyond like your low-key grows or people that were growing in dorms and stuff like that. And I just kind of saw a potential. Sourced some really good stuff out of Spain, and then started figuring out how to work photo periods into that. How did they get from the ruderalis to the lowrider, which had better potential than the original ruderalis? So how could we improve upon that? And that's basically the route that I took. Several years of inbreeding and selecting and, being mentored by European breeders who'd been doing it for a while kind of led me to work on my own cultivars that I thought were pretty, that I enjoyed to smoke. And then lo and behold, I got my first opportunity to release some of the work that I'd been working on through DC Seed Exchange. And it just ignited from there. Once they got out, it's to the point where it's getting hard to keep up with demand. So I appreciate everybody in the community for that, because without that, we wouldn't be having that conversation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. When do you think that inflection point was? Like, it seems like it's, as someone who's I've dabbled in autoflowers, but it seems like they've really hit this inflection point in the last few years or so where they hit a quality point to where people can no longer, to be blunt, like talk shit about the quality of them. You know what I mean?
Oh, no.
What do you think that was?
I would say probably within the last, like the big influx over the last 3 to 4 years. I think we're starting to see an adaptation to the commercial grows and beyond. I think there's been a couple things that caused that influence. One, green rush, man. All these states going legal. You got a bunch of home growers who have never, have maybe dabbled with it, but due to legality issues, they were too afraid. And, I think now that the home cultivation is becoming a huge thing, it really caused that influx. And then people like Jeff Lowenfels, who he got crazy about him. He did a whole book about it.
Yeah.
And Shango dedicated, his entire 2019 year to all of his circuits and his shows for Shaping Fire and stuff, all to autoflowers. So I think within the last, 4 to 5 years, it ramped up. It grabbed the big guys' eyes, and then they're like, holy shit, this is something new. This is, these guys have really put in the work. And I think, with the legalization in stateside, it allowed more guys to work with them freely. And the community's always been tight knit because, like you said, we're always shit on. So we had to rely on each other rather than a large set community.
Right. Totally. Well, so now we're going to get into questions from the community. So last week when I knew that you were going to be able to come on, I reached out to the community and I said, hey, CannaBuzz community, what are your questions about autoflowers? So kind of put these in somewhat of an order. So hopefully they'll kind of make sense. So to kick us off, our first question is from OU812. And he asked, his question was about container size and shape. What do you recommend for growing autoflowers?
Plain and simple, cloth pots with a tall vertical drop. In reality, I get my best yield and my best size from those results. I've grown in every type of plastic shape that you can imagine. And I notice if you have a 3-gallon plastic hardwall pot next to a 3-gallon cloth pot with a nice vertical, about the same size, the cloth pot will outperform every single time. It does require a little bit more watering, but it also gives the user the ability to kind of not worry about overwatering because those sidewalls are going to dry out quicker. It can help you if you struggle in that area.
Interesting. And so have you, what's your container size that you recommend? And I'd love to know what you recommend indoor and what you recommend outdoor for growing autos in terms of size.
In terms of size of pot indoor, I like a 2 gallon. Sometimes I'll run a 3 gallon, but cloth pot, but like 2 gallons are kind of my jam. And that's basically because of my size restrictions indoor.
Right.
Outside, it kind of depends on what you really want to do. And I'll give a couple different avenues. If you're running regular autoflower seeds, I'm one of the very few guys that still offer regular autoflowers. Not as many as I used to because there was a big demand for feminized. But one, if you're running in beds, I mean, if you're running in beds outside, you got a garden bed, they're going to get huge. You don't really have restrictions. But if you do decide to go in pots and you want to run regulars, you can put 3 or 4 in a 20-gallon pot and then call your males. Your females are still going to thrive. They're going to do fine. There's a lot of root volume there. But if you're going to be running outside, I mean, I run cloth pots as much as I can unless I'm in the ground.
Yeah, I do too. So this is kind of selfish, I'll be honest with you in terms of this question. But if I grow some outside and I have cloth pots, I've heard recommendations, and like a lot of people, it seems like they recommend like 7 to 10 gallon pots for autoflowers. But I'm wondering if I was running like, let's say a feminized autoflower, just one in one pot. Or do you recommend actually multiple per pot?
And the only time I recommend multi-potting is with regulars. Because, you don't want to waste the space. But if you're going feminized and you want to go for like maximum yield, I wouldn't go over a 7. A lot of, and the reason I say that, there's 2 things, and there's controversy on it. And not controversy, just, unset science is like,
right.
Transplant or not to transplant. Will the root volume fill the whole pot? Will it not? And I think that comes back to, if you want to transplant, be careful. You can go up to a 7-gallon pot and water from the outside in, make the roots chase the water. But I definitely wouldn't recommend anything larger than 7 outside.
Interesting. All right. So that actually gets into our next question. Our next question was from Chantel, which is her username is @Nova Scotian Pothead. She asked, how long should you wait before you transfer a plant from one pot to the next? Is there a certain time frame that she should follow?
I recommend before they show right around or before they show sex. So like the 2-week mark, and most of the autos are showing sex at these days. Anywhere between 14 to 20 days, you'll see sex. If you started in a smaller container, like a solo cup, for instance, I would say transfer it before those first true set of leaves start reaching over that cup. Tends to be a good sign that your root volume is getting pretty full inside that cup. Or if you have, 4-inch square pots, look for your roots to start touching the bottom. If you start to see those roots coming in there, you want to get it before it's root bound.
Yeah, I feel like I've tried this in the past, and where I fucked up is transferred them probably a little bit too early, because when you take the plant out and then like all the dirt just falls out, and right. So I think, and then the auto just went nowhere. I think because they just probably was too shocked or whatever.
Well, and when that dirt fell off, you probably took some of the roots with it, and like you said, it probably shocked it pretty well.
Right. Okay, so you want the plant. Excuse me. You want the plant to kind of fill up that root volume, that soil volume. Like you said, if you're growing in, we see a lot of people growing in solo cups. So, when the plant's kind of filled up that solo cup a little bit more, it's safe to transfer it. Is there any other tips that you have? Because there's so much controversy about, can you transplant autos at all, period, and that's tricky,
It is, and you can transplant them. It's not one of those things where like it should never be done.
Right.
You can transplant them, but don't have, and for lack of a better term, like gorilla hands with it. You know what I mean? Be gentle. Be conscious of your root volume, so you don't run into the situation where the bottom of the soil falls off and then pulls half the root ball, because autos like to shoot that main taproot straight down. If you watch deep water culture growers, you'll see that taproot just goes and goes and goes before it starts going laterally. And what you want to avoid is snapping off that taproot. So yeah, let those roots kind of fill that volume up. You want to catch that happy medium between when it's enough volume to hold the entire root ball together and prevent circling and root binding.
Totally. All right. So we had our next question. We had actually two members that had kind of similar questions. So we had Beelzebub and Sticky Icky Cookie both asked, what are your feeding recommendations or practices? How often? How soon? And what do you recommend? Do you like organic or salt-based nutrients? The whole big topic there. But how do you feed? When do you feed? And what do you feed with?
Right on. So most of the time I run organics. I purely run organics. I do run salt-based too because I like to diversify my selection process. Not everybody can grow, or not everybody but understands how to go through the entire organic process to make sure that plant has what it needs from start to finish. So we'll start with salt-based first. It's probably going to be the quickest and easiest. And this is for 2-gallon pots for reference. What I like to do, if you're running in a soil that's inert, such as like ProMix HP, we'll use that as an example, or if you're running in cocoa, something that doesn't have any nutrient value at all, those soils are going to start to need, or those plants are going to start to need food around day 3 to 5 from my experience, especially in ProMix. Cocoa, I can imagine the same. And it's super light doses. Take a look at your bottles, depending on the line that you have, and we could go over 1,000 lines, but general recommendation is start off quarter strength. Maybe even a little less than a quarter of your initial dose. Something light. It doesn't need to be much. It just needs to find that basic NPK at those very early stages. At those stages, you could feed, you can feed them, and by feed them, I mean add the nutrient solution to your water every other feeding at that light dose. Watch the plant. If you notice it's taking off, great. Stay with it. As it matures, start stepping yourself up. For example, the Fox Farm line seems to be extremely concentrated, and you can go quarter. I've never really gone to a full dose, even in high plant growth that they recommend. So, if you're using something like that, watch your doses. Be mindful. You can always add. You can't take away. It's just like using salt in dinner. If you break the lid to the salt inside the pasta sauce, you just might as well start over. So, start little. You can always add more. Organically, it depends on pot size or if you're in the ground, but organically, it's water only. I usually, if I'm in pots, I wait for the pot to get semi-light because you don't want it to completely dry out, because you don't want to kill that microbial life. That microbial life is your saving grace in the organic soil. That's what converts the solids and the other stuff in the soil for your plant to be able to eat. So that is an important thing. Usually go by pot weight. If you're germinating in a 2-gallon pot and you want to leave it there its entire life cycle, I recommend water it through until you get a little bit of runoff. And that's also going to give you an idea of how heavy that pot is when it's fully, truthfully watered. And then you can, take a pot that you're getting ready to plant in, feel what that feels like, and that's about the differences you can use to judge it. I think that's the easiest way, especially if you're using the same medium.
Totally. I agree. Even with, I'm growing in 30-gallon pots right now in my backyard, or I will be this summer. Even those, you can kind of lift up a little bit, and you can feel, a big difference between when you put the soil in to begin with, and it was just, your soil, and then when you added water, and you can kind of just really use that to gauge, like you said, is there like basically no water in here, and then am I accidentally basically killing everything that's in there in terms of your microbes and probably your worms and everything else?
Correct.
Yeah.
That's a really good point, because like if you're using an organic soil, it has some moisture content to it already. It's not field capacity, but it does give you an idea of what it needs to keep it alive, especially when you tug on those pots and figure it out. Anything beyond that, like you said, you start killing things in the soil.
Right. All right. So our next question is from Something Different, and they asked, what are your thoughts on topping and training autoflowers? That's a great question.
It's a great question. It's becoming more common. I think with your more modern day autoflowers, it's becoming more not acceptable, but it's becoming easier without causing too high a stress to the plants. I don't do a lot of topping personally, and it's just because I like to see the natural growth. It's for other reasons, but topping and training is definitely a plus that I've seen a lot of guys doing a lot of great things with. If you're going to do it, I would suggest starting, especially if you're working with feminized seeds, you can start right away, especially with LST. Once they start getting a decent sized stem to where, they can take a little bending without breaking and being too fragile, you can start bending those things out any way you want, start bringing those secondary nodes up, giving yourself more tops. Topping, same thing. Let the plant get a little bit of structure, at least 2 nodes. So if you're going to top, you get 4 branches. I think more modern day, it's definitely a great yield, increase to your yields, a good method to add increase to your yields.
And how big are plants these days with autoflowers? How big are they typically getting with like kind of the good, I obviously going to say it depends on the genetics, but I mean, from the really good stuff that you guys have out there, does it tend to be like, hey, they're X amount of feet or whatever tall?
They're getting bigger. I mean, I've seen everything from the average becoming more along the lines of like 3.5 feet to upwards of 6 footers. I had a 6.5 footer break my 6 foot fence outside last year. Didn't expect that to happen. But I let it grow with the sun. I had it in my hugelkultur bed, and it just took off. Those are less common as far as like being consistently that big, but like on the average, I would say between 4 and 5 foot.
Cool. Awesome.
Some pretty big ones out there these days.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Let's see. Our next question was from T-Bean, and it was about outdoor growing. So they're asking how was an interesting question. So interesting hypothetical. They're basically asking, because an autoflower plant, automatically flowers based on whatever light schedule you give it. Could you compare an indoor plant versus an outdoor plant? Because an outdoor plant's only going to get, however many hours in the day of sunlight that you get, maybe 13, 14, like at the peak or whatever of summer, or maybe a little bit more. But in indoor, you can give it, 18 or 24 hours of light or whatever. They're asking, would there be a difference between the two? Do you think the outdoor would win or the indoor would win?
Yeah, I could see exactly what they're asking. They're asking if there's a distinguished difference between the expression of the plant based on the amount of light hours. And I will say yes. And I've been toying with that this will be my 3rd season outside here at this house, where I could have had time to get, the beds ready, a true greenhouse up, and start messing with the cultivars. And I have seen a definite difference in expression between an outdoor plant and an indoor plant from the same seed line of my stuff. And I believe it's definitely dependent upon the light hours. I mean, at best here where I'm at in the Olympic Peninsula, we get 15.59 hours of daylight during peak, which is a substantial amount of light. And I still notice that the buds are slightly more airy than when they are, and I've got them underneath these LED. I run a 20 on, 4 off cycle on all my autos. I used to run 18.6, but due to the climate here, I can run 20 on, 4 off, and it's really, really nice. I can run year round like that. But I have seen a difference in the flower expression now, and that's in 2 different areas. One, the structure of the bud, and 2, I see better trichome production outdoor than I do indoor.
Interesting. And could you expand on that? What do you mean?
So I'm seeing a higher density per micron of trichromes, so more of what we consider a hashier flower than what I see inside. Now, some of that does come back to genetics, and it's not a huge difference. But like I take a look at the dried flower comparison pictures after an indoor harvest and after an outdoor harvest, and I can definitely see the stalks seem to be longer outside. So far and none of this is based on science. This is based on
just your
observation. Yeah, just observation of the same cultivar. And these cultivars are F4, F5, so they've been inbred several times, and it's interesting to see that. But I do definitely see a difference in environment. Now, the flower inside will still do great trichome production, but the buds are a heck of a lot denser
and harder. Yeah. Interesting. This next question was from Dr. Phil Gowd. I think it's a play on Dr. Phil Good. I will need to get them to tell me how to actually pronounce their name, but they had a question about breeding autoflowers. So what is your procedure on the timing and method of pollination on your selections each generation? How do you pollinate to ensure a fully seeded crop? Is getting a pollen donor ahead of time and storing it for use on a future run a good way to go about it? Will I get more than enough pollen off of one male if grown properly? Like basically, sounds like they need some tips on collecting pollen. How much pollen will I get? And then how do I make sure that I'm going to get a lot of seeds from my crop?
Simple question is, or answer is, if you want to make seeds for your first time and just get an experience of the mechanics of the process, if you've got regular autoflower from the same seed pack and you got one male, one female, let them grow together. They're going to do their natural thing. I'll circle back to what I said earlier. Cannabis loves to reproduce. It really, really just loves to reproduce and make seed. So if that's what you want to do to experiment to see what it looks like, you can grow 2 seeds from the same pack, one male, one female, let them mature at the same time. The male typically comes out of the gate faster, and he gets his pollen sacs open way before that female's really ready to receive pollen. And by the time she's at like optimal pollination point, the pollen's flying heavy. So you'll notice the males are getting up and quick and early to the job, and the females take a minute to mature.
I've noticed that with photoperiods even too. It seems like males are way quicker on showing sex and being ready.
Yep,
so do you recommend then collecting that pollen then, because they're gonna get there early?
No, because males, especially if a male is in the same environment that the female's in, he's going to produce copious amounts of pollen for weeks.
More than enough. Okay.
Way more than enough on a standard regular seed. Now I'll throw a slight caveat in there. When you do a feminization process, some females do not drop a lot of pollen when you have a successful reversal. Others do. Something about the process, it's not like your traditional male-female, but if you're running male-female, you're not going to have to worry about collecting that pollen. He's going to throw it for weeks.
Interesting. So back to, I guess, collecting it. How do you, if you wanted to collect pollen, because for whatever reason you have a male and whatever your reasons are, and you want to collect pollen, what are your recommendations for kind of collecting and storing it for future use?
Well, I'll give an example here. I grew some Australian bastard cannabis during the summer last year and did a reproduction and a preservation on it, just strict IBL. And I also wanted to introduce that into one of the autos that was outside. Now I have a lot of other flowering crops out there. I don't want to just set a male outside. So, I had to collect that pollen to do so. And there's a couple of different methods you can use. One is plain and simple at the base of your plant. Get yourself a piece of white construction paper or anything, cut yourself a slit down the middle of it, slide that over top of the soil, and then, let that plant will just start dropping that pollen down on itself. You can do the same approach if you just want to catch some flower, directly from the flower. You can use a cupcake liner. I'll cut a cupcake liner, put that around the base of a nice big set of clusters and put a slight piece of tape on it so it can, catch it in that cup. And then you can just spill that cup out onto a piece of paper. It doesn't take a lot of pollen to make a lot of magic happen. It doesn't. I'll take a Q-tip. So for instance, when I did the outcross outside, I took a Q-tip and I took that Q-tip and I just basically rolled it in the baggie that I had the pollen in, not down in the actual pollen, but just along the sides where the pollen had statically stuck to it. And that was more than enough to produce 800 seeds on one branch.
Dang. And just one branch too. Because I think they were kind of trying to get an idea of what to expect as well. Because he was saying he wants how do I pollinate to ensure a fully seeded crop? Honestly, I guess if you wanted a ton of seeds.
If you want a ton of seeds, let them, put them in the same room together and let it go until the male dies. You really don't need to go that long. It takes roughly 4.5 weeks for seeds to fully mature from what I've seen. And that's either from auto to auto or an outcross to a photo or photo to photo. Usually good markers, 4.5. I let them go 5 or 6 if I can. I like to have good, healthy seed all across the board. It's one of the reasons why it takes so long between releases for me is I want healthy germination rates. I want healthy seeds.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it makes total sense. Because that's what everyone's starting with, and you want to make sure those seeds are healthy. All right, this next question, this is actually the last question from the community, and then I might throw a couple more at you because we have a little bit more time. Sure. So this last question from the community is from Big Bear Canna, and they asked, can breeding with autos shorten the flower time and the offspring if I crossed it with a non-auto? So they had like a scenario where they were like, I have like a 12-week haze, and if I cross that with like an autoflower that I like, and they said they thought they might have even actually accidentally done this, and they noticed that one of the seeds had like a 7-week flowering time. And so they were wondering, like, could an autoflower hitting a photo period, especially like a long-running sativa, could that, end up changing the flowering time so much, and all that kind of stuff?
I would say yeah, and that's one of the things I'm currently trying to accomplish right now. I have a couple of different projects in mind. I'm working with some new photo to auto crosses, one of them being to shorten the flower time of one of the photo periods. You get what they call a fast flowerer,
Right.
For lack of a better term. You've noticed it may have some of the similar morphology of the original parent, but you notice, okay, the flower time is dropped from 10 weeks down to 7, or 6 weeks before, or you see an earlier trigger, to where it, like, and the reason I say earlier trigger is because, like, if you're growing naturally outdoors like you and I do, you'll notice some plants will start going into flower at like just over 14 hours of daylight, where others need like, closer to that initial 12. And you only get to see that if you're growing under the natural light. You don't get to see that in a room that's forced 12. They're all going to trigger because it's well within the realm of that photo cycle. But yeah, I think you can shorten flower times and also potentially start earlier triggers. Like, again, it's theory based. It's just from what I've seen. But I believe it is definitely possible. And I've talked to breeders from like Dynafem and a couple other companies where they've actually, they call them fast flowering, because the auto was put to a photo that had, a super long flower time, but now it doesn't.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, I grew a couple of years ago, I grew Tardis, which is from Homegrown Natural Wonders, and that was a strain that definitely flowered early. And when I'm still new to kind of growing period, but also new to growing outdoor, and that can kind of throw you off because you're like, when did flowering start, and why are all my other plants over here not flowering yet? It's like really kind of confusing. But yeah, that's totally interesting. Yeah.
That's a fun thing to see outdoor. A lot of people don't realize that, because we've all seen 12 and we've all been indoor for so long because they're hide and grows that, who would have thought about that cycle kicking in at different times for different plants? I have Pinkleberry, which I've been wanting for a very long time, from Green Source Gardens, and it flowers extremely early. It starts its flower cycle which is nice up here because we get a lot of rain. Yeah. And you only get to see that if it's truly outdoor, and it's wild to watch.
Yeah, that's what I mean. We've kind of we didn't actually touch on that, but I would love to. I think it's worth pointing out the benefits of autoflowers, because actually one of the questions that I didn't include was basically people kind of taking shots at, like, why would you even breed with ruderalis, bro? Was kind of like the gist of the question of like, right. Why would you even like dabble in that genetics? But I feel like there's so many benefits to autoflowers that people might not appreciate.
And I agree with you, and we still take those shots. It's nowhere near what it used to be, and I had a comment recently when I announced that I was working with Pacific Northwest Roots and a few of their cultivars. Why would you just water down the genetics? Why do you continue wanting to work with ditchweed? And it's not so much to try to prove a point, it's just following a passion. I think the benefits that will come from it are faster flowering strains for different hardiness zones. I work a lot with Maine as well as over here on the coast, because we have long daylight hours, but we have a short growth cycle because the rains come. We get a lot of rain, and we all know that rain and flower just doesn't mix.
Not a good time.
It's not a good time. I mean, you can get stuff that's resistant to it, that's been selected in the environment, but to have a shorter flower cycle and to be able to run that on a larger scale saves so much time and overhead. And with the quality and the selection process that's going in, it's not like there's a lot of pollen chucking going on, which is great. That's how you learn. But like with the guys that have really put in the time, and not just myself, that have really put the work into selecting these based upon stronger genetics to improve the cycle, there's starting to become less and less difference. It's almost hard to tell a well-grown autoflower from a well-grown photoperiod as long as the genetics are good. And I think that's something that's skipped over with photoperiods too. Not all photoperiods are stellar. We see a lot of glitz and glamour and shiny things out there, but those also took work to get there. People don't realize that. Yeah, some of them are happy accidents, like a slinky. You know what I mean? The slinky was an accidental invention, and you get Hermes that see the crop and then stuff shows up like Gorilla Glue. We get those lucky ones every now and again, but they've all taken work. And I think the autoflowers are just finally starting to catch up to the public eye. So I think there's a commercial benefit. There's a home grower benefit, especially if you're learning for the first time and you want to set up a tent and lights in all the new states. I think it's a good introductory way to get into, growing your own medicine. And so I think the benefits are far and wide. I think they reach across both spectrums.
That's what I think. I guess I would really challenge people to think about, as a grower, there's so many tools in the toolbox, right? Whether it's how you build your soil or feed it or whatever. And the plants you grow are definitely part of that, right? And you have a strategy to what you grow. And oftentimes it might be like more, whether it's demand based, like this is what the market demands, or maybe this is what I like to smoke. But in this case, I think autoflowers are super, they have such a utility, whether it's, if I could get a great CBD autoflower that my mom could grow, and especially if it was, crossed with, like you said earlier, the Australian bastard or freak show or something like that, and it looks kind of like a tomato plant or whatever, you can do all these interesting things to where, you can grow plants in conditions where, like you said, you have rain, or I have people have heard me complaining about caterpillars come really hard, all these different challenges that people hit. Autoflowers can really fit in super well into all these different use cases, because not everyone has like a perfect situation where they can grow a ton of weed indoor, or they can grow it on a big scale in their backyard or whatever.
Right. Yeah, there's, niches for everything. Like you said, from somebody just wants to grow some great CBD for the mom to filling up a veg room that's full of clones and pulling a harvest while you're transplanting those clones for your next 12-12 cycle.
Exactly.
There's multiple different avenues.
Yeah, and that's what I'm so excited about, where we're at right now, where people, it's part of the challenge right now, because we're still getting out of prohibition, and it's still, federally illegal, and not to mention all the states and all their different restrictions. But we are not quite there yet to where you could have like, here's the autoflower that's best grown in Maine or whatever. Right. But we are getting close to there. Like, that is not in the far distant future, where we're going to get there to where we have these different things. And that's going to be such an amazing time where we can grow the medicine that fits to where we live and all these other things.
And I agree with you. Jeff made a comment. He said, he could imagine one day where you walk into a big box store, and not only do you find your tomato seeds, do you see your autoflower seeds, which I would personally love. But on the back of those vegetable seeds, you have hardiness zones, and those hardiness zones are figured out by, a long proven process. And like you said, we're in the infancy of that. I've worked with farms in Maine, I've worked with farms here, I've worked with farms in Oklahoma, worked with a lot of farms in the New England area, a couple in the South. And as we see, as I have that ability to work with those farms, I can see how they're, performing in those areas, seeing what the differences are, and then it's forming that graph for me. So like you said, as we're crawling out of the prohibition, we're getting the ability to do it on a much larger scale to fit that niche, to figure out, hey, I'm in Oklahoma. All right, these grow great in Oklahoma, but these grow better in Maine.
Right. That's so interesting. Well, we've got a couple more minutes, so I would love to hear, just personally interested in, Yeah. Anything else that you're kind of learning from shifting from autoflowers being grown, in the home or in a small area or whatever, to now you just said, working with farms and different geographies with different weather patterns and all this kind of stuff. It's got to be just such a wild time right now, a fun time.
It's very exciting. You're seeing the biggest thing I'm seeing is the cost savings for these farms, especially in the Maine and the Washington area. The harsher climates, they don't have to pull tarps early anymore, so that immediately is saving on labor. They're saving a lot of money on fertilization costs because they don't eat as much. Some do, but like in that commercial setting, you're seeing huge cost savings on stuff like that.
Totally. That's really cool. Yeah, I'm really excited about it because I've got my, plants that I love to grow big and all that kind of stuff. Last year I tried to grow as big as I could, and I got that, but I had a lot of other challenges that came with that. But I love, autoflowers. I'm really excited because I can, have those long-term plants that I'm, starting now or whatever, or soon. But then I could have autoflowers that I can harvest in the middle of the summer rather than having to wait until, the end of October to actually have something that I can smoke,
Exactly. No, I know exactly. And I do the exact same thing as you. Is like right now I'm sexing out all of my photo periods that will be going out in long season. And I like to grow big, giant plants in the summer. And I can throw the autos in the hugel bed and let them rock and roll. And I throw them in there in June, early September, I'm harvesting. I'm not having to wait, all the way to October or the end of October, depending on how the weather wants to shift up here.
Yeah.
To pull down that harvest, because then once that hits, that's all I got time to do. So, there are, especially like you said, the struggles of larger plants, from the trellising to the weight to
drying,
the harvesting of it is like I had to shut down my entire indoor grow to dry everything.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's a big challenge, but it's neat to have that diversity, man.
I know.
Like, the autos are sitting out there chilling with the tomatoes and the cucumbers and the tomatillos while the photo periods are getting their size on. As I'm harvesting some tomatoes and early peppers, I can pull down a few of the smaller autos. It's pretty dope to see.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with you. I would love to have you give us some shout outs to any projects that you think people should check out, any autoflower breeders or sites that people could go to buy some genetics that you recommend, or anything like that. Just feel free to give a shout out to your own, channels as well, obviously.
Right on. Well, I appreciate that. Quickly, if you want a lot of good information without having to mine through the internet, autoflower.net is going to be your number one source for tried and true guys that have been growing this stuff for a long time. You may have some waiting to do because there's a lot of information after 10 years, but I'm telling you, if you want to find good sources, tried and true processes and guys that have done repeatedly, that's the place to go. It really is. There's a lot of other good forums that are out there, but as far as like searching out direct information and seeing the origins of autoflower and even just the wave as it started to, rise up, that's the place to go. A lot of love for the guys over there, especially Jordan and Mossy and Willie. He's one of the other guys that helps run the site. I really appreciate those guys that have, kept that alive and kept that heartbeat going. Give a little shout out to DC Seed Exchange and Hember Genetics Collection, two of my biggest retailers. Love those guys to death. They always have my genetics available when I have them in stock to make them available. But big love to them. We've added a few new ones recently. Gotten a few stuff that's internationally, so check that out. Check my full duplex _AFN feed for all those that new information. The guys at Bio365 hooked me up with a bunch of soil to run this summer, and I am pleased. I'll be honest with you, I will never touch ProMix ever again. Unless I'm
what's their soil like, I guess?
It is a biologically active water-only soil. It does need a little bit of assistance into the flower stage, but they tell you that on the bag. Each plant's got different demands, but great soil design, bug-free. That's the big thing. No fungus gnats, folks. None. Like, I haven't seen one fungus gnat. And I love that, especially indoor. You know what I mean? I don't have to fight those with sticky traps and getting caught in the beard, and it's just a mess.
Nice.
So that soil has been tremendous. I'm using their BioStart, BioAll, and BioFlower for this run, and I've got a mix of the three running, and I've not been disappointed on any way I've blended it, stacked it, or used it independently. It's really, really good stuff. And, it's shout out for them. There's no sponsor there. They said, hey, try this out. We want to learn more about Autoflowers. We want to see how our soil performs with it. And I said, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's run it. And this run that I'm running for the Camp Ruderalis Autoflower Cup is absolutely gorgeous. I'm very pleased. And I'll talk about that real quick. I don't mean to hold you up.
Oh, you're fine, man. Do your thing.
I want to give a shout out to Chef Sebastian Carosi for putting together the Auto Cup 2021 Camp Ruderalis. It's going to be up here in the Hood Canal in Washington. A lot of heartfelt effort being put behind this. I think it's going to be one to remember. The 2019 was fun, but I think this one is just going to be something completely different.
When is it?
It's August 6, 7, and 8.
Nice.
Like I said, up here in the Hood Canal. And when I say resort, I don't want people to think bougie, but I also don't want people to think terrible. This resort is a nice place along the Hood Canal. It's got cabins near the water. They've got a lodge. They've got fresh oysters and clams that you can harvest right there daily while you're there. It's a beautiful setting. If you want a good idea what the Upper Peninsula looks like here in the Olympics, you got to come. I think there's going to be a lot of change and shift after this, or at least I hope so. It just has that good feel to it. So that's something I'm really looking forward to.
Where can people find out about it? Sorry.
It's okay. Autoflower Cup 2021 on Instagram is going to have all your information. I don't know the direct URL. It just got launched recently, and I apologize, Chef. My bad. But that's going to have all your packages on there, what you can do to rent to stay locally for the event, see what's going on for the event, the guest speakers, the judges. If you go look at the Instagram, it's the Autoflower Cup 2021. Actually, my phone just fell. Let me grab it and I'll tell you exactly what it is.
It's all good. I've done that too while I've been doing this.
Yeah, it fell out of my pocket. But yeah, that's going to be an epic event. I'm really looking forward to it. And I think people, if they're curious about it, come check it out. And it is the Autoflower Cup 2021, campruderalis.com.
Awesome.
That's where you can check it out. And that's what the name they've given it. So that's something I think everybody should check out. And then some love to Photon Tech Lighting too. They hooked me up with one of their new series of lights over here, the 600 watt Pro, and the thing's absolutely just crushing. Super powerful light, no LED light bleach. And I've got some plants that are within 8 inches of the actual LED bars themselves, and the purple color's coming out. There's no bleaching going on. So I'm loving the light, and I will, I definitely longtime supporter there too.
Cool. Cool. And plug your company and where can they find your website and all that kind of stuff? Just make sure that, where can people find you?
So Mandalorian Genetics is my genetic company. Again, you can find me DC Seed Exchange, Hemorrhage Genetics Collection, Defunct Selections. There are several other places too, and I apologize for not having the top list, but all of that stuff is linked in our bios. The Mandalorian_genetics is our main genetic page. Full Duplex AFN is where you can watch what I'm doing and how I'm doing it and the changes that are coming. We do a lot of live feeds with that. If you want to listen to some of my other podcasts, check out the Autoflower podcast. Got a lot of historical information on there. I've done a lot of chats with Chad. It's been the biggest platform that I think I've shared the most on. So that's kind of how you can find us. I don't have a direct website up yet. I've been lazy about that. I've been using Instagram mainly as promotional, but I'm working on it. I'm getting there. I want it to be right. I'm going to be a little picky about it, I think.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Full Duplex, and thanks to everyone in the CannaBuzz community who submitted questions. We covered a lot of great things. I would love to have you back again sometime to talk about autoflowers. We've got a lot of people that are passionate and interested in autoflowers in the community, and I'm sure that this will spark even more questions. So I'd love to bring you back in again sometime.
I would love to come back. It was this was a pleasure today. This was nice. Cool. Good to put a face behind a name. Yeah. You know what I mean? I really enjoyed that. And please do. I always tell people to DM me questions if they've got them. If I don't respond immediately, don't get upset. It's a busy time of year for me, but I do try to reach out to everybody who's, tries to reach out with questions or concerns.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone who's watching live right now. If you're not watching live, make sure to check out our CannaBuzz Premium and Associate Producer memberships. That's how you can watch this live and watch it a week early before everyone else. Everyone else out on YouTube land and WeedTube and everywhere else, give us a thumbs up and subscribe. We'll be back again soon with another episode or show from CannaBuzz talking about growing cannabis and smoking it and all that good stuff. Thanks so much, Full Duplex, for joining us, and we'll see you all again soon. Peace, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video from CannaBuzz. I'm Q Grows, the co-founder at CannaBuzz. Behind me is my dog Josie, and we really appreciate your time today. If you had a great time with this video or you appreciated the knowledge that was shared, please give it a like. Please share this video or other videos from CannaBuzz with your friends, and definitely do check us out on the web at cannabuzz.app or search CannaBuzz in the App Store or the Google Play Store and join the CannaBuzz community. We are well over 100,000 community members, and you can even become a supporting member so that you can help make more content and help support this community directly through our CannaBuzz Premium and Associate Producer memberships. That helps support this community directly and helps us keep creating this content. So give us a like, a share, sign up for CannaBuzz, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks all.